how much is genuine gluten intolerance versus fad, and what is causing it, and anything else that you think is relevant around gluten intolerance?
Okay, I think we need to step back here, Finlay, and ask ourselves, how long have humans eaten gluten for? Long time, 16,000 years, maybe even more. Even before the advent of farming, I'm sure we were consuming grains as some form of sustenance. Okay, so we've consumed gluten for a long time. Has celiac existed in this era where humans have been consuming grain? The answer is yes, but why are the rates so dramatically rising? Why is it that this product known as gluten is causing this enormous spike in celiac disease? I mean, you just need to know that the incidence and prevalence of this disease has risen multiple fold in the last 50 to 60 years. It has to be more than just gluten, okay? Because gluten's made up a huge part of our diet. We've been eating it for thousands and thousands of years. What I suspect is occurring, and gluten is a lectin. There's no doubt that it can enter the spaces between cells and sort of get into the systemic circulation and whatnot, but it's always done that. Now, why is it that it's causing an issue now? I suspect we have something called leaky gut, and my proposition and my thought is that the utilization of pesticide, in particular glyphosate, which we know is an antibiotic and probably does result in some intestinal dysbiosis, which is basically an alteration of the gut, is a major player in this. The use of glyphosate in the last 30 years has gone up about 1,300%.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
Okay, so you might look at the graphs of celiac disease and glyphosate use and say, is that really correlation or causation? But at some point, you have to step back and ask yourself the question, is it really the wheat? Is it really the gluten, or is it the wheat? Okay, and that's the fundamental question that we need to ask ourselves. What I'm starting to believe is that it is probably the quality of the wheat rather than the gluten itself.
So back in the day, when we had these more sort of or less adulterated forms of wheat and barleys and grains, we were better able to tolerate them, or it was just the absence of this glyphosate. Glyphosate is causing such a problem with our microbiome that's causing us to have many symptoms of allergy and intolerance.
That I think you're getting closer to what I'm starting to understand, that the damage is within the gut. The gut is permeable, leaky. The internet calls it leaky gut. I suppose that's the term that we can use. When you've got leaky gut, when you expose your gut to foods that may contain things like gluten, it's just much more of a problem. Not just gluten, but foods that we classically were able to tolerate decades ago and hundreds and thousands of years ago, we're less able to tolerate now. The question that needs to be asked is, why is that? And I think it's because the gut is less readily able to do so. The gut is more damaged. What's damaging it? I think we have to start looking at chemical-based agriculture and what role that's playing with our health.
And when you're saying the damage caused, there's obviously multifaceted stuff, and you're talking about glyphosate, and you're talking about gluten and these different aspects that can pasteurization. What is it that can our guts heal from this? What's our time frame of healing, and what do we need to avoid in order to heal?
Okay, all right. So let's and part of the answer might be depressing, but I want you to think of an experiment. Okay, and this is a real life experiment that was performed and published recently. I can't recall the journal. They took one generation of mice, okay, exposed them to a lot of glyphosate. Okay, these mice didn't really get that sick. They were fine, largely speaking. They were okay. Now, the generation that followed after them, okay, the children of these mice here, were not exposed to glyphosate. Okay, they had a diet completely free of glyphosate. However, they were sicker than the initial generation.
Oh wow.
Okay, but what's really scary is the third generation that followed, which were the children of these the second generation. These mice were sicker still without the exposure to glyphosate. As I said, the damage is intergenerational and very, very depressing. And this is why I kind of sometimes make the point that every generation is getting sicker, and that's not just anecdote. I mean, you just have to look around you to know that disease rates in children are really soaring. And we have to ask ourselves, why is this? At what point did we start normalizing massive amounts of autoimmune illnesses, cancers in our children? And we have to look at intergenerational damage. It's depressing.
And when it is very depressing. When you said it was going to be depressing, I kind of hadn't prepared myself for the intergenerational fuckery that's going on there. But yeah, when you're talking about these mice were getting sicker in the next generation, with what sort of things? Was it sort of, they were less resistant
all sorts
to
of things, also just metabolic health, cancer rates were a lot higher, just general health. And we've got to stop separating out disease states, saying autoimmunity, cancer, metabolic disease, diabetes, gout. These are all fundamentally the same disease. It is non-infectious inflammation. And I think the thing that underlies it is probably something called mitochondrial dysfunction on a very deeper level. It just has different manifestations. So instead of breaking down diseases into its various causes, we've got to start looking at it from a holistic picture, and it's all just part of the same process. It's damage to our internal machinery.